Hi, everyone. Welcome back to She Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Wright, and today's guest is Cece Robinson. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell our listeners why the Queenstown is such an important setting in this series?
So, they always tell you in writing to write what you know. And Queenstown is Cincinnati 45 years in the future. So it is my city after we fought a civil war, after a dictator took over everything and settled us into areas divided up by our racial ethnicity and put up walls and then left us there. So setting divided into a location that I knew really well was helpful for me as a young writer. It just helped me to have a grounding in a world.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So, how did the concept of the walls around Queenstown come about?
Well, if you're a dictator, you want to control people, right? And so I just kind of put myself in a bad dictator, evil dictator's shoes and said, well, I want to control people. So what do? I put walls up, I divide them because when we are divided, we can't unite. And if we're divided, then we don't have the power. And that's a way to maintain the power. So that's how the walls came into being. Now, they they initially started out like in the lore, in the history. This is not really necessarily in the books, kind of hinted at in the books. They started out as just cement block walls. And then, well, teenagers are going to scale those, like parkour enthusiasts, that's going to happen. So then they got barbed wire and glass on top of them. And then there were still attempts to escape. And that's when the sonic field was added to the walls. And so they gradually just became more and more um, uh, like impregnable. So you couldn't escape on purpose. Because again, he wants to maintain power.
Oh man. So what real world inspirations helped shape your post apocalyptic war?
So there were a lot of real world inspirations. I could go all the way back to my time as a medical doctor in Sierra Leone and seeing people survive what was their apocalypse, a civil war, 30 years, 3 decades of bloodshed, families being killed right in front of people and like limbs chopped off. It was horrendous, but yet they survived. And when they emerged from that, they had this hope and a belief in the power of reconciliation. And um, I saw a nation reconcile one to another, people that had killed each other's families, forgiving each other. It took time and a lot of hard work. That's the first real world inspiration that I took into the books. And I wanted Divided to always have this undercurrent, the whole series to have an undercurrent of hope and survival despite how awful the situation is. The second real world inspiration is the tunnels. So we actually have tunnels underneath the city of Cincinnati, and they're not quite the way I envisioned them. I kind of made them a lot bigger, but so I definitely brought that old underground speakeasy, the beer tunnels during the Prohibition era into the novels as the location of where the underground met.
Oh, okay, nice. So what regions of the former US still exist in your fictional
Mm.
world?
I'm sorry for the various coasts, but you're not here anymore. Um, I think it's pretty easy as a post-apocalyptic author in a way to like just get rid of whole swaths of people, and we do it kind of indiscriminately. But yet, I have friends who live in New York and DC and North Carolina and California and Oregon and Washington, and they would all be gone in my future America, and I have to apologize to them. Um, Texas is its now own nation, as none of us are surprised by, and they've taken over a good portion of the Plains area as well. And then, but really, the Federated Republic of America is boiled down to an area that's somewhere between the Allegheny Mountains and the area, right west of St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
Kentucky's Kentucky's gone. Sorry,
Oh man,
I
Kentucky,
that's
no.
where I grew I know that's where I grew up, so I was like, "Oh, man." There's a lot of military bases in Kentucky, though, so they had to get annihilated.
Oh
I
man.
know.
So can you describe the Underground's mountain sanctuary?
That was such a fun, little story to write. So in Deception, which is sort of it's the second novel in the novella companion series, Rose's mom, Sophie, gets sent to the national headquarters, and it's located um, in an area of the Appalachian Mountains that not many people end up going to. Um, it's called the Hollers of Eastern Kentucky, and it's known for its caves and the systems of caves. Um, and so that's the area that Deception is set in, is sort of southeast Kentucky, in the area of like Rockcastle County. There's a great saltpeter cave there that we toured one year as an entire Robinson clan, and I was looking around inside. Well, this is the perfect place to hide out in the apocalypse. And so, a story was born.
Nice, nice. So what technologies or resources exist or are missing in the future?
Well, the world crashed with an electromagnetic pulse over the central part of the United States. So that wiped out all of our electricity from the get go. And part of the Supreme Commander's Martin's bid to power was promising restoration of electricity. And so we do have electricity and running water again. Obviously, we're within these walls that are sonically enforced, and so there's a new a use of sonic technology that's not currently in use. We do have embedded chips, so that's fun. We can be tracked. So much fun. And then there are various different means of control that the patrols use, nonviolent, non-lethal means of control that, believe it or not, are actually in use today in some levels with our special forces. So there's a blending of current technology, some future technology, but the United States, in my books, is notably behind the world. Outside of our world of the United States, their technology has advanced by leaps and bounds.
Oh, wow. This is neat. So how does the government control citizens in the FRA?
So, like I said, the walls keep people in and keep people divided. They control what jobs you have, where you live. They control like what set of people you move with. So, like you think about your job, and like the people that you get to know in your job become your friends. And so, by controlling the employment, they control your friend group. They control your social your strata and the social organization, in which any area is going to have a social organization, right? There's going to be the haves and the have-nots in any society. No different here. And so the government controls all of that. They don't necessarily control who you marry. There's not that level of authoritarianism. But by segmenting you into a certain population within your area, they're controlling who you know, which is there. Obviously, there's a level of control with the chips and the embedded chips. In order to receive rations, which the population is dependent upon, you have to scan in and out of the rations depots. And to buy anything, you have to scan your chip. So there's even just for regular commerce activity, if you decide to be a rebel and take your chip out, you may not eat.
Ooh. So this is a question outside of the questions I have listed for you. Where did you come up with this story? It's so neat. It kind of reminds me of what's that movie called? The Island. Kind of sort of like The Island a little bit. I don't know if you
The
watched that.
Island. I've never seen that. I've heard people compare my books to Divergent, but in a racial setting, and I would say yes. There's that parallel, or like the Hunger Games with the districts.
Yeah.
There's that parallel as well. I've not seen that. Now I'm going to have to add a movie to I'm not a huge movie watcher. I'll have to add that to my list. But where did I come up? It started with a dream. So I had an all-night dream seeing the Civil War, and I was involved in it.
Oh,
And it was really like scary and awful and just brutal to live through. But then, like, I woke up and was obviously very distraught, somehow got back to sleep and went right back into that same dream and met my four protagonists. And this is, I forgot about this last time I was telling this story, but Harriet, my African American protagonist, ended the dream by like she's a dreamer herself. She's not necessarily an I wouldn't describe her as an artist, but she's more in touch with her emotions than any of the other characters. And she took it was like she was flying through Queenstown, flying over Cincinnati. All these, I saw the areas, I saw the division, and I saw the wall. But then she took colors from each area, and it was like she was painting them in the sky. And that's how my dream ended up with Marcos's voice saying, "Free us." And I woke up and I knew I had to write the story.
wow.
It was
That's a very vivid
wild.
dream.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Man. So, what kicks off Marcos's journey in The Divided?
So in Divided, Marcos is the star. So you'll see all four of my main protagonists have scenes of their own from their own POV. But Marcos is the character that really drives the story. So he just wants to escape. He has an abusive father and he's just kind of done. Marcos is a tad bit impulsive and he figures out a way outside of the walls. And no one in Queenstown history has ever done this. So he just escapes. But he doesn't know, and the reader doesn't know that there's chips and all that, they can be tracked. So he gets out into the abandoned city, the destroyed city beyond, and he is just beside himself. And he realizes in his impulsivity, he's made a huge mistake. It's not like he can like get to the independent Republic of Texas or to Canada where there's refugees in a protected region there. He doesn't know anyone. Like, how is he going to get there? How is he going to eat? How is he going to fend for himself? He'll just run around lost. And so he realizes this is a mistake and he tries to get back in the city. And that's when he's caught. So that kind of is the whole thing that sets off his journey.
Oh, dang. So, how does he end up in the secret labor camp? You don't have to tell us if you want that to be secret.
No, it's not too huge of a spoiler. It's still in the first part of the first like 25% of the book. So that dad that wasn't very good, well, kind of sends his son out there. And yeah, that's really sad. And like it was extraordinarily difficult for me as a writer to put Marcos through everything that he had to go through. I would write some of his scenes and then I would just cry. It was awful. Like he's become like another kid to me. But he had to go through all that in order to get a bigger picture. He was just interested at first in his own freedom, not realizing that his own freedom isn't enough.
Man. So, what's the biggest turning points in the divided or in the divide? Divided. Yeah.
Yeah. So Divided, I'd say the biggest turning point is when Marcos realizes that he can't do this alone. It's too big. Freedom is too big of a thing for him to try it at alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he brings other people in.
I can't wait to read this. So,
pretty pacey.
So, in the deception, what's the secret Sophie uncovers? Or do you want to give that away? Is that like a big spoiler?
It is kind of a spoiler. There is a huge secret. She is a woman of secrets. You know, she's been an underground operative for almost her entire life. And being an operative has defined her more than her job or her place as a mother. So she handles secrets like most people handle like jewelry and clothing. Like they're just normal. They're part of her makeup. They're part of what she does every day. And so when she comes and realizes there's something she doesn't know, sorry, she's just got to figure it out. You know, you can't tell someone who's in on all the secrets that something's wrong and there's a secret there. She's going to scent it out. And so she does. And it gets her into a lot of hot water. And she has to figure out a way out.
Mm. So how does I mean in Caged, what
Mhm.
is the prison like for that where Rose is held?
Yeah. So Rose has an ever shrinking life. She starts out and divided in her area. And, little Asia's wonderful and amazing, but she yearns for more. She can see over the wall, but she can't really see anything. She's in a tower condo and everything's kind of blurred and fuzzy. And in Divided, she discovers the labor camp and starts in with that. And so she gets a taste of freedom outside the city. And then she's in this physicist training program. And because of some of her actions, uh, she gets locked in her own condo under house arrest. So her world shrinks from her area, then the whole area, to this little condo. And she's going stir crazy. And so she keeps poking and pressing. She's a little bit like her mom in that. She just has to know. She has to know. She has to figure it out. And because of that unrelenting curiosity, some people decide that she needs to be silenced and they kidnap her. And she ends up in a small closet in a warehouse. And there's a point in the book where she literally uses her feet to measure her prison, and it's like 12 rose feet by 9 rose feet. And it's like she doesn't even have any other way to measure it but by the length of her own foot. And it's a symbolic shrinking of her world because she was in the wrong place. She shouldn't have stayed in her program. There's a lot of things that she shouldn't have done. And she realizes a lot of that in her prison. So it's wonderful. It's good for her. It's also awful and horrendous. And we as a reader want to like shoot everyone who's doing this to her. But at the same time, she has to go through all this in order to get to the other side of her own growth.
Wow. So how are the betrayal and the hidden agendas central to Betrayed?
So there are Betrayed. I'm currently writing, redrafting it. It is, and so it starts out with a huge bang, a huge surprise. And I'm not going to give that surprise away. But what that surprise does is motivate the underground to go look for their allies. And, it's no secret they had been supported by the Independent Republic of Texas and by a group of refugees in Canada, from refugees from the America and Canada. And yet, when they get there, their teams get there, it's a road trip journey. They discover some issues and some plots, and there are betrayals that happen there. So I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want to spoil it. And I know those betrayals. I know what's going to happen, but at the same time, like I want people to be surprised.
Ooh, yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit of questions about the characters. What
Mhm.
makes Marco Sanchez a compelling protagonist?
I think he's really like he's an everyday kind of guy. He goes to school. He's smart. He's not like overly smart. He's not, doesn't excel at everything. He kind of fails at history actually. And that's like normal, right? He's a normal kid. He loves to tinker with machines and wants to be a driver, yet his dad wants him to go into administration, which is like a little boring. Like sending him to English class. You might as well just, shoot him. And so there's conflict. What teen doesn't have that conflict at some level? Even the
Yeah.
best of parents, the greatest of parents, a teen is trying to define who they are. They're trying to figure out who they are. And Marcos is going through that, and his dad is kind of um, pigeonholing him into a certain mold that he doesn't want. And, because of that, he acts out. He does a lot of things that, maybe would be familiar to us as, when we were in our teen years. And he'll just like go running just to pound out his frustration. And a lot of us run too. We may not run physically, but we run, metaphorically away from conflict, away from the issues, trying to just find ourselves again. And so I think that's what makes him a compelling character is that he's so like normal.
Hmm. Hmm. So, how is Marco's relationship with his father central to the story?
So I think, as I've said, he just really wanted to get away from his abusive father. His dad was physically abusive, but he was also emotionally and mentally manipulative, trying to get Marcos to fit into his vision, his image of what he wanted for his son. And and so his dad definitely catalyzed Marcos's need to escape.
Hmm. Man, so who is Rose and why is her journey so important in the rebellion? Or
Yeah. So Rose is she is a brilliant, like off the charts genius in math and physics. Uh, don't ask her to write something; it's not going to be pretty. And she's not real great with people. She is probably neurodivergent, probably on the autistic spectrum, and so I wanted a character that that would reflect a part of our society that we're learning about as people, that we're learning to accept and learning to embrace as people, and put her as sort of a fish out of water into her own society where they didn't have IEPs and 504s. Like, they don't have the special education resources that we have here, and they don't have the understanding that's kind of regressed in a lot of ways. And so put her in there and let her struggle with not fitting in socially, wanting always to find her place. And when she is admitted to this elite physicist training program, because she's years ahead of her colleagues, has already finished all the college um, courses with the help of her science professors, her high school science teachers. Um, and she gets admitted, she finally feels like she belongs, only to be rejected for her youth. And so I think that there's a journey in there that a lot of people will feel is familiar to them and reflective of their own journey.
oh wow, nice. So so who is your favorite secondary character and why?
Gosh, I really okay. I have kind of two. Is that okay? Can I have two favorite secondaries?
Yeah, yeah.
So I really adore Marcos's little sister Flavia. She is a spitfire. Like, she is just so, like, for being raised with an as abusive and a father as she was, he was never abusive toward her. And I think it's a study in just contrast to see how different in a lot of ways she and Marcos are, but she's a spitfire. She's so confident and flirtatious and beautiful, and yet also like this great athlete and a wonderful friend. So I kind of adore her. And then I also like Sam Truitt. He is um, Jason's patrol partner in Ivory, and he's just this really steady guy. He reminds me a lot of my husband, actually. And I didn't like craft any one character based on anyone in my current life. There's some characteristics, I will say, of my family members, myself, my husband, whoever, that show through in characters. But I think Sam he's very level-headed. He doesn't like fly off the handle, get angry. He doesn't like pace around and gnash his teeth. He just goes, all right, this is a bad situation. Let's figure this out. Like, he's just really calm about everything. And so I think he's a good influence for the rest of the crew. Even though he's young, he's only 18. So
Oh wow.
those are my two
So
faves.
nice. So what does hope look like in such a broken world?
I think hope looks like finding people who think and believe like you do, and banding together and collaborating for a better world. And even if it's on a small scale, just improving things on a small scale is that provides hope because it shows that change is possible. And so even in the oppressive world, hope is finding those people who believe in freedom as well and working toward that, not giving up.
I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the theme. So Why
Yeah.
did you choose to explore like the racism and the ethnic conflict in the dystopian lens?
Yes. So remember that dream I had? It
Mhm.
happened right after Trayvon Martin was killed.
Really?
And yes, so it's in 2012. We thought we were post racism, right? Because Obama was president. We were so enlightened. And then that happened. And to me, it just unveiled the hatred and prejudice hiding in our hearts. There was a UN peacekeeper that I met over in Sierra Leone, and he said, you know, the people of this nation have not only laid down the weapons in their hands, but the weapons in their hearts. And I realized in that moment, sitting there after that dream, that we have not laid down the weapons in our hearts. We may think everything is okay on the outside, and then that happens. And 2020 proved that we're still not over this. We are not in a post racism America. We are very much in a current racism America. And I think it's easier for us to like turn a blind eye to that and focus instead on other issues, not realizing that those other issues at their heart is really racial prejudice. And if we don't figure this out, we will divide. We won't stand as a union.
Oh man, I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
It's bad out there. It is. It's really
Mhm.
bad. So, how does trauma shape each of the main characters?
Trauma shapes all of them. They've all had very traumatic experiences under the regime. They've witnessed executions, they've witnessed arrests, they've seen friends and family members just disappear. They've experienced death and loss. I think the one who has experienced the most of all that is probably Harriet. You know, she grew up in a family that have been part of the rebellion from the start, and as a result has experienced quite a bit of trauma. And so Betrayed is not just a road trip. It's not just a story about finding allies and encountering betrayal. It's also a story about realizing that you need to open yourself up to other people for healing, and then experiencing that healing from grief and loss. So it's all wrapped up into that one big story in that third book.
Oh man. So, why did you choose to write one and a half book Deception instead of a straight sequel?
So all of the main novels are each focused on my four POV characters, my point of view characters: Marcos, Rose, Harriet, and Jason. They each have chapters from their point of view, and then each of them get a book to really be the one who advances the plot. Um, the novellas are sort of like either secondary character side quests, or in the case of Upheaval, a prequel. And they're intended to be a companion series to the main series of Divided. So eventually there will be four novellas and four novels, all in the same world. And possibly others, and maybe a standalone or a prequel duology or something like that. Like I'm working on some other things, but they're meant to enhance the world and show the reader what's going on, or a picture of the world that they wouldn't get from the main four POVs.
Okay. Nice. Nice.
Mhm.
So, are there repeated symbols or anything that readers should look for?
Absolutely. The wall is definitely a symbolic, it's almost a character in and of itself, in the way it prevents people from interacting and controls their world, controls their situation. And uh, as Divided series progresses, the the wall strength is changed, and it's a metaphor for breaking down the walls between us, if you can imagine that. It's maybe not a very veiled metaphor, but it is a metaphor in there. There are other Easter eggs which I am not going to disclose, but
Nice.
they exist, and look for them. When you're surprised, ask yourself, why am I surprised? I shouldn't be surprised. Go back and look. It'll be there.
Nice. So, are there any events in the books that inspired real historical events?
For sure. The all of my time that I spent in Sierra Leone definitely inspired just the survival mentality. But I studied World War II, post World War II Europe, and how that continent recovered from war, and the things that were needed in that time, um, in how I built the world to begin with, if that makes sense. So obviously, our nation was destroyed, and someone had to rebuild it, and so that's part of the whole backstory that really isn't on the page, but it contributes to the underlying world that the characters live and move in. But other real world things, I would say, not directly.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, without spoiling, what's one plot twist you are most proud of? Without spoiling. That's gonna be hard, isn't it?
I don't know if I can do this without spoiling it. At the end of Caged, there is a major reveal
Oh,
that if you want to throw the book across the room, I would counsel you go back and read again. You will see something that maybe you didn't see before. That's
okay.
it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Okay. So, how do you keep readers guessing without losing clarity?
I think a scene has to be totally contained within itself as far as goal, motivation, and conflict. So if any one of those, the character's goal, the character's motivation, or the conflict that character is working through aren't clear, then the scene itself will be muddy. So that's almost like you can't deal with it on a book level or a series level until you deal with it on the scene level. And so that's where a great editor comes in. And I have a wonderful editor, Kaylee, um, keeps me honest in those and makes sure everything's super crisp and clear.
Ooh, so is your editor looking for clients? No, I'm just joking. I'm kidding.
Absolutely. She absolutely is.
So, my last and final question before I let you go is where can my listeners find your books?
So they're at every major retailer. The ebooks for Divided and Caged are exclusive to Amazon, though, because they're in the Kindle Unlimited reading program. So if you're a subscriber to that, you can read them for free there. Um, the Little Beauty Upheaval, this little book, it's short. You can read it in a night. Um, Newsletter subscribers get that one for free. And there's always little goodies I give to my newsletter subscribers. But all of that, I have a link for your listeners at, of course, the HTTPS, all that, ccrobinsonauthor.com/she blurbs. They can get
Ah,
that special offer and everything.
nice. I want to thank you so much for giving that to my listeners.
You're
and
welcome.
and thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.